Hello everyone, it's me, Dusty Circuit here, to bring you the next installment of this series I've just started, titling, what are, all the computers I've owned in my life, or something like that. And in the printer recap, in the past video, I covered the very first my first computer, the E-Machines E-Tower with the Celeron 300A. At least that's how I remember it. And right, then the next computer in this list. Well, just to elaborate what this is more about, it's just about the thought processes of mine that led to me acquiring these computers, like on how I got them and why, and kind of how what went great with them and what went wrong with them. And really, this next computer, the exact reason why I got this has kind of been lost to time. But I had to I'm guessing it had to do with, it was because it had, a lot of pre-installed games. And well, me as a kid at the time, it was like I must have this. Well, it's kind of a bit of a long story, so I think one day when I was my mom picked me up from school. I forget why, but she one day took me to a used computer shop. At least it's local to our area, and in fact it's where we actually got a lot of, at least my family has gotten a lot of their computers from. But just one day my mom took me to the store, and and I guess then they had a lot of desktops, computers on display, and one of those was the computer that I'm going to be talking about in this episode. And what I remember about it is it was a IBM Netvista, but I don't remember the rest of the model number. But though I do remember its specs, I guess kind of similar to the previous, to the E-Machines, but really the reason I got that I wanted my mom to buy this, so I was still a kid at the time and I didn't have my own money. And really the reason why I wanted my mom to buy it for me was it had what at least seemed to me at the time like an endless amount of well, I guess it was around 10 or 11 games pre-installed, but to me at the time, it seemed like it would be like nearly endless entertainment for me. And I think even the clerk of the store even let me play a couple of the games. And really at that point I was like, oh, I must buy this someday. But of course, my parents being not very like not having much, or not being very rich, at least in terms of disposable income, I had to wait quite a while for this one. Like like my mom, I think, was like, well, I'm sorry, we can't get it now, but what we can do is have the the store keep it in layaway for us. And my understanding is like how that worked is they would like keep it for us until like we could come in to buy it. And like if I ever, I don't remember what even the price was we had to pay, or even how long the waiting period was, but it was probably around quite a few months. And after quite a few months later, my mom finally was able to pick it up for me, and really, then the day we were able to bring it home, I was quite excited. And really about though this computer wasn't a tower, it was a desktop form factor, actually quite similar to the computer I mentioned in the previous video. Only this one was black. Then that other computer and my e-machines were both beige. At least that was when beige computers were like commonplace. But so I think we also got a keyboard, mouse, and monitor with this computer. And as for the specs, again, I didn't quite know at the time, but retroactively I found this out. And for a CPU, it had a Pentium 4 1.8 gigahertz. And RAM-wise, I think it had 256 megabytes. And storage, I think it had a 60 gigabyte hard drive. And it had a DVD-ROM drive, which is kind of a first for me, and a 3.5-inch floppy drive, though the previous computer had those two. Only the previous computer I think only had a CD-ROM. And this computer also had a video card, but that was only because the motherboard lacked onboard video output. And it was really more of just a display adapter than a graphics card. And what was in there was it actually turned out to be a NVIDIA Riva TNT2, which, so if those of you who don't know your computer history, well, that just predated the first or at least the first GeForce card from NVIDIA. And I believe it released that released in 1999, and so it was like actually I think it was quite a few years older than the computer it was in. I believe the computer was from around 2002 to maybe 2003, and though really the highlight of like why I got it was the games it came with. And as for what the games were, uh, one game, at least one of the games I played a lot was a hamster ball, which is well, if you're at all familiar with, I believe it was like Marble Madness. I think it was in arcades. Though I think I would play a version of it at some point for the NES or the Nintendo Entertainment System, and I think there was also a kind of a game like it called Monkey Ball. So really, what the concept is you are basically you're like a well, in this case, you're a hamster in a ball, and you control its movement with your mouse. And really the object is to roll him through all these different levels that get progressively longer and harder. And the other thing is you are playing to a time limit, but it was cumulative. So like every level you'd win, your previous time would be added on to the time for the next level. So it's really in order to beat the game, you're going to want to, at least for the earlier levels, go through them as fast as possible, or else you're not going to have a lot of time to complete the harder levels. And I think it had like three different difficulty modes, and I believe as a kid, I was able to beat the game, but it was quite difficult, and it took several tries, and several times I would have just rage quit, and so I think part of why I wasn't terribly good at that game was I was using a kind of a not very great mouse at the time. I don't remember if it was optical or mechanical, though I have a hunch it was a mechanical mouse. And mechanical, I'm meaning like the type with the heavy ball, and that would move two rollers inside, and that's how it would detect which way you're moving the mouse. And the main problem with those is they got dirty over time, and unless you cleaned out the rollers on a regular basis, the mouse would it would get unresponsive, or the rollers could get stuck. And I believe at the time, I guess that's kind of what I was dealing with. But at the time, I didn't know how to clean out the mouse, so I just kind of lived with it. Though I think later on, I a little later on into me owning that computer, I was able to get an optical mouse, which was definitely a nice upgrade over that. And then I think then the next game that I really, at least that I really played a lot, was a little game called DX Ball. Sorry about that. My mom needed to come in my room because she needed to borrow my camera. But anyway, the next game I actually played on that computer, at least that I played a lot, was a game called DX Ball. Which, if you're familiar with the classic arcade game, I believe it was called Breakout, where you have like a paddle and a ball, I guess sort of like Pong, but only the object is to break blocks with the ball. Or by hitting them with the ball. And although this game put quite a spin on that concept, and it's, I mean, at its core, it's still Breakout, but there's also like other, like there's power-ups, and there's also like, I guess, negative power-ups, like things you don't want to get. Yeah, or at least that would make the game harder as opposed to easier. And there are even different types of blocks. Like there are some that would explode, that would destroy the nearby blocks, or at least the directly adjacent blocks. And there are like indestructible blocks, or at least not without the right power-ups. And there were like invisible blocks that would appear if the ball hits them. And I think there was even a type of block you had to hit 3 times for it to remove it, for it to break. And I think a few of the power-ups included like make your paddle bigger, give your paddle guns so you can shoot the blocks, or make your ball explode if it hits blocks. And like I think one that would make the blocks basically transparent, like if the ball hits them, it just keeps going through them. And I think a few of the negative power-ups included shrink your paddle, and there was also one that would shrink it all the way down to the minimum size. And then there was a speed up the ball. And I guess opposite of that, there was a slow down ball. And then there's one that would basically, if you catch it, it would take away one of your lives. And contrary to that, there is a power-up that gives you an extra life. And though it really got me hooked onto that game, is that at least at the time, to me, it seemed like it had an endless number of levels. Well, it actually has 50 levels, but to me at the time, I could only, like at least when I first started playing the game, I could only get through like maybe the first 10 levels if I was lucky. And really, as I got better and better at the game, it just like I'd make it maybe another 10 levels in, like to like the 20th level, and then I would just hit and then I would hit another difficulty wall, and it just seemed like it just seemed like beating the game, actually beating the game all the way through was this like this huge obstacle that was like at least to me at the time seemed nearly insurmountable. But one interesting story. My father actually sometimes would actually learn how to play these games that I played, and I guess this was one of the games he played that he decided to learn how to play. Or really how it was is we take turns like getting through each level, but I remember there was this few times I remember this vividly because uh like there are several nights where like me and my dad would just like take turns like beating each level, and I forget if it was me and him that got to the end of the game together or if it was just me playing it by myself, but my memory tells me that one night, one of the nights me and my dad were playing, I think together we made it to the end of the final level. And that was just one of those proud moments that it's like, well, really anybody who grew up playing video games, or especially older video games, probably would remember like if they played a game all the way through and completed it. Just I kind of had that kind of that's the feeling I had when I made it. Beated that game all the way through. But that was really difficult for me to repeat. I guess largely because I just wasn't really. Maybe I just didn't have very great reflexes. Like when it got more fast paced, I'd always lose the ball. But and I think the other factor was I was still dealing with my crappy old mouse that didn't work too well. And though as of recently, I actually had a go at playing that game again. A really long story short, I ended up transferring those games to my current computer, and I had another go at playing them, and at playing DX Ball, and I actually like the game ended up being a lot easier than I remembered. Though I don't know if that was down to maybe I'm better at faster paced games now, or I actually have a mouse that works now. It's just I'm probably putting it more to the latter. But that game alone, I think I probably ended up sinking hundreds of hours into. And I think maybe same with Hamster Ball, though maybe to a bit of a lesser degree. And the next game that I actually played a lot was at least that was came with that computer. It was a side-scrolling shooter that I think it was called Heavy Weapon, and it was basically you were playing as this tank, and I guess from what what I understood, the story was just like the world was at war or something, and you're this tank that's like having to power through all these enemies, and uh, but another thing about it is that I guess like the X Ball, it did have power ups as well, and but another thing about it is at the end of every level you got to choose an upgrade for your tank, which is pretty cool. But by the end, it's like you had to choose one or the other. But by the end of the game, you would end up having all the upgrades. And 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 this was another game I played a lot, but this one kind of has a sad story associated with it. And it stems from the issue that I mentioned in my previous video, where my mom is very strict about video game violence. And this was one of those games that made my mom basically draw the line, and it's like, no, you can't have this. I'm deleting it from your computer. That's what ended up happening. And I was very, very angry. I was at the and it's just understandably so, but I was just forced to just come to, but it just at the time, like I was angry at the time, but I just had to come to terms with that my mom was just trying to be a responsible parent, uh, and I guess what doesn't help things is, especially where I live, gun violence is a problem, and it's just is kind of just it's this and it's become so much of a problem in the US, or at least to my non-American viewers, that like young kids playing shoot 'em up games just looks really bad. And it's like and it just from the way I understand it, it's like influencing people, like kids, to want to be killers or whatever. And it's like, and it just, between that and my mom reading about like all the shootings that have been happening, it's been school shootings, that it just, to my mom, it was of her best interest to keep me away from those kind of games. And though by the time I got to playing Minecraft, this phase of my life pretty much was over. Actually, I guess that was enough for my mom to trust that I'm not gonna learn to be violent or whatever, and if anything, I'm just playing a game that is teaching me to be creative and learn how to do things, like learn how to be a better, like, I guess, engineering kind of kid. And so really by that point, I was more or less kind of just free to keep playing keep doing what I want. And by the time I had joined Autcraft, I guess at that point my mom was just reassured that I'm not going to be getting involved in bad things online. And I'm gonna end this tangent here. I don't want to dwell on this, but I'm just gonna say that, like, I'm happy that I am where I'm at now, and that I at least I have the freedom that comes with being an adult, and I can that I'm allowed to do whatever I want, at least for the most part. And so anyway, I think the next game that I played a lot on that computer was I think it was called Dynamite, or at least I think that was at least how you say the name of it. And it's really this kind of, like, it was kind of a puzzle strategy type of game, but also some modes where there was like some action modes to it. And really the goal was, the way the object is like you're shooting these different colored eggs, and the way the goals match up, like, I think at least 3 eggs of the same color, and then I guess they would be broken. And again, and it's just, the object is clear as much of the screen as possible. And they're like different, and there are also different game modes. Like, I think like one was just like you're just it's just like keep up with like clear the screen as fast as possible. But if the screen gets too full for too long, you lose. And I think there were some puzzle like modes, and and then I think and then really the rest of the games that were on this computer were more of like the puzzle slash strategy variety. And like, I think like there was another one, I believe was called Collapse. That was, I guess, the kind of a similar concept to Dynamite, only it's with like just colored blocks. And you're just having to like match them up to clear the screen. And also had different game modes. And then there was another game called Bejeweled, which it's really kind of a similar concept, where just you have all these different, where you're just kind of clearing objects from the screen. But each game had its own like unique rules and challenges and game modes. Though really the only other game of note was an arcade pack. Like it had all the big classic arcade games, like I think Pac-Man, Snake, Asteroid Invaders, or Asteroid, Space Invaders, etc. And then really this computer was to, this computer did provide me with quite a bit of entertainment. And I think later on it was to get other like educational games. But But for the most part, I think the games I mostly played were the like Hamster Ball, DX Ball, and Heavy Weapon, or at least until it got deleted. But the one kind of curious thing is I think one day I just had an urge that I wanted to I wanted to pop the top of this computer, see what it looked like inside. But though this computer was fairly simple to do, it had a toolless case. I think you had to press two buttons on the side in, and then it would unlatch the case so that you could lift it up. And I think just the outer case and the front bezel came out as one unit, and just kind of leaving the inner chassis behind. And though I saw something kind of curious to me at the time, though I didn't really. I think at this time I didn't quite know what it was, but fairly soon I would learn what it is. As I'm around this time is also when I first when my electronics hobby first started off, and I didn't really quite know this at the time, but the motherboard had how computer motherboards have capacitors on them for smoothing out the power supply voltages, and especially for the purpose of the voltage regulator modules or VRMs. Like what I was seeing is this motherboard had a row of there were I think 10 or 12 electrolytic capacitors in a row. They're basically what they look like is they're little cylinders. They think they'd be black or blue, and then they have a silver top. And usually they're supposed to look flat on the top, but many of these capacitors were domed on top, and a few of them even looked like they had been leaking for quite a long time. Because the tops are brown and corroded looking. And I didn't know this at the time, but I soon learned that that's what happens when electrolytic capacitors go bad. And really, what they are is they're little small batteries. Or at least they're constructed similar to a battery. These you would have. Really, how they're made is they're just I think an aluminum can with a roll of aluminum foil and paper that would basically form the working part of the capacitor. It's really what a capacitor is two metal plates separated by some kind of an insulator of some kind. And the electrolytic capacitors, what made them electrolytic was they contain a liquid electrolyte. But this would come with the failure mode of over time, the capacitor dries out, and as it dries out, it would develop even new capacitors have the resistance. It's a equivalent series resistance, and but as the capacitor gets older, it loses its electrolyte, which makes the resistance or the ESR go up, and this would cause the capacitor to heat up inside, and this would cause some of the electrolyte to boil or to turn into a vapor, and this would cause pressure to build up, and if that pressure gets too much, the capacitor would dome up, or the top of the capacitor would dome upward, and if it's bad enough, that would split open and allow the electrolyte to start escaping or start leaking out. And I think in other cases, the capacitor, like the rubber seal on the bottom, would fail, and this causes problems for whatever the electronic device or computer they're installed in, but both by the capacitors losing their capacitance or their ability to function as a capacitor, and also the liquid electrolyte were to leak onto the circuit board, it would cause not a hard short circuit, but like it would cause a low resistance pass between different parts of the circuit, and this could cause it would cause erratic behavior because electricity is going where it's not supposed to go, and because the leaked electrolyte is causing a path of low resistance for a small amount of current to leak to adjacent connections, or at least it's not supposed to be going. I'm doing a terrible job at explaining this in layman's terms, but at least hopefully it may at least somewhat make sense. But basically this computer had, I think, like half of the capacitors, or at least in the VRM section, at least that was next to the CPU cooler. I think half of them were bulging and a third of them were actually corroded. And I was just shocked that that the computer was still working despite that. And though that isn't really uncommon, like these capacitors aren't necessary for the computer to function, but they are needed for, at least from my understanding, they're needed for reliable operation of the computer. Is if I were to load Cinebench on that computer, like, or some kind of app that would actually heavily tax the CPU, I hazard a guess it was probably the computer's probably going to like hard either hard lock or hard crash, and like or like basically crash and reboot, because the CPU would be being either starved of power or being fed dirty power, maybe because due to the lack of filtering, maybe because of the faulty capacitors. But at least in all the time that I've used that computer, that's never happened. It's at least to my knowledge, it's never even exhibited symptoms of having bad capacitors. It's just despite having a bunch of them. And but then, as part of me being as part of my electronics hobby, I would eventually find the loophole, the rabbit hole that is, well, you can just desolder them and replace them. But I never ended up trying that because I think at the time I both had just not very good equipment and also not very good skills. And I just was not confident in my ability to like unsolder the capacitors and replace them. And also in addition to that, I was still living off of my parents' income, and and if I were to ask, or my mom or my dad, if I could buy capacitors for my computer, maybe I might be able to get them, maybe not. But at least for all the time I've owned this computer, I just never bothered with that. I just used it as it is, and it never it never really gave me a lick of trouble. And though though this computer I actually would actually keep for quite a few years, but by around 2010 or 2011-ish, it really became apparent to me how slow that computer was, and how far out of date, at least hardware-wise, it was. Because I believe about that time, my mom just was like, "Oh, okay, you can have internet access, but she was still leery about like what sites I'd be going to or what things I'd be doing online." But it's just at that moment in time, I guess I was allowed to get internet access to my computer. But I found very quickly, I believe at one point I did hook up an Ethernet cable to this computer and try to browse the web, but it was very apparent to me just how slow and how underpowered this computer was. And really for about 3/4 of my life, I was just living with potato computers, but this computer was not like it was so potato that it was hardly even functional on the internet. And I guess in that case I'll refer to it as a rotten potato. But so I guess that's also kind of fitting considering its capacitor problems. But though I was too. I think after that experience of like not being able to use the internet, I think I would keep using this computer for I think think about another year or so. But I progressively began to use it less and less, and it just would end up being turned on less and less, and I think eventually I believe by 2011 my mom was to get herself a new computer, and because that computer that she bought to replace the e-machines, at least as her computer. That computer at that point was really feeling long in the tooth, and it was touched to about time for her. She was at that point she was overdue for an upgrade, but by 2011 she finally got that upgrade, and though it was a really big, it was one, like it was a really big step up though, hardware wise. I think that computer she had, I think, I want to think it was also a Pentium 4, but it was probably, it would have been a Celeron that was like based on the Pentium 4 architecture. But but from that, that this new computer she got, it came with a Core 2 quad. I believe it was a Q9550, which was a quad core for four core CPU, clocked at 2.8 gigahertz. Which this would have been a night and day upgrade over a single core from the early 2000s. And so really at that point that made my mom having the, at that point my mom had the fastest computer in our house, and so really, it got to a point where I just because that computer I currently had just couldn't, it just wasn't functional on the internet. I think I ended up just putting it away in my closet, and whenever I wanted to use the computer, I would just borrow my mom's computer. It's just she would share it with me again. And though after a few years that got old, and so and in 2014 my mom is to buy me my third computer that I'm going to be talking about in this series. And it was a similarly night and day upgrade from my IBM Netvista, at least that I've been using. And though before that computer was to be, though I think this was after that computer replaced this computer as my like daily, like what I use every day. I think that was a little later on to try to use this computer to program I believe it was a pickaxe microcontroller, but I just couldn't get it to work to save my life. I could get the software to work, but I just couldn't get the program onto the actual chip. I couldn't get that work to save my life. Though for my less technically minded audience, this was again part of my electronics hobby. And though the reason I used my old computer to do this it required at least this task that I was doing. It required a serial cable, and at the time that was my only computer I had to have serial ports. But I think it was after trying it a bunch of times, and after purchasing a USB to serial adapter, I just ended up giving up on that endeavor. But now that I have my own income now, I'm actually I was considering maybe getting an Arduino, but possibly soon. But I guess we'll see. But anyway, so after that, this computer really just sat in my closet for the rest of its life. And sometimes I would pull it out because I still wanted to play those games on it. And the last thing I did with this computer, at least that I remember, I believe I was in 12th grade at the time, and like this was, I think, a couple of years after I replaced it with my third computer. But at the time I was involved in a computer science class, and I think we were given a project in which we were to design a video game, and then I think if my memory serves, I end up digging this computer out of the closet because I think we were making Pac-Man, and well, because that computer actually had Pac-Man on it, or at least like a copy of it. I very well could have just gone to Google Images for this, but I decided I really just wanted to take a picture, or at least take a screenshot from that computer, and I think I used Paint to crop it a bit, and then I put it on a thing. Then I was to transfer it to my current computer at that time using a USB flash drive. And though really after that it just ended up going back in my closet until uh one day, I believe Mod Killer, or at least we're still friends to this day, but I think they had this bright idea. uh I think it was I really wanted to. I think it was because that I was really kind of desperate to get some kind of a computer upgrade for cheap. And well, my friend had this bright idea that I was going to basically part out that computer, like take it apart and sell the components. But that ended up not really work. That ended up not panning out. And though though I really kind of regretted doing that because uh well, if I'm to recover files from that thing now, what I'm going to have to do is uh transfer it directly off of the hard drive. And though I did hang on to that hard drive, like just kind of keep it safe. And and I think with one of my first stimulus checks, I actually bought a, like it's this USB device that allows you to plug in either a SATA or an IDE hard drive into it. And and also had a and also came with a power supply or a power adapter because the USB port doesn't provide enough power uh to power the hard drive. And so really, I just paid $30 for mine. And really what I did was I just plugged the drive into the adapter. I plugged the adapter into my computer, and then I plugged the power supply into the wall. And then I just had to flip a little switch on the adapter, and that powered up the hard drive. And then all I had to do was just access the drive as if it were a flash drive. And then I was able to copy all of my my files off of it. And though really it was mostly those games and some more of the and also some more of those drawings that I made with paint, which I did continue doing that on this computer. But though really that was kind of that's really what ended this computer's life, was just me taking it apart because my friend had that crazy idea. But at least it was kind of fun to do it because it's like I looked at taking apart computers as just like a hands-on experience, like for me to kind of learn how they go together. And really when it came time to building my first computer, this this experience actually was to my credit. And this experience was to my benefit, because really the only thing I needed to learn how to do was installing Windows, which actually turned out to be fairly easy. But So if you want to learn about that, stay tuned for uh, that episode of this series to be uploaded. But as for this computer, it even though it was kind of an impulse purchase at the time, it did it did actually provide me with years of entertainment, and uh, despite that one bad experience with with that one game, I did have very many good memories of using this computer. And as for that game that was deleted, I found it. I managed to find it on Steam, and I now have that game back. So, I mean, I guess that's at least a happy ending for you. And really, I can't really I can't thank it enough. And although even at the time it was a fairly old computer, and by the time I was able to use the internet, I just needed to use my mom's computer because that one was just too old and too slow. Uh, it did may have a lasting impression on my childhood, and it also continued my interest in computers, or at least in PCs. And although I guess there's one, I guess I have one more thing to share. Is that computer had a DVD-ROM drive. I believe at one point I did try to play a DVD movie on it, but I was able to make it work, but that drive had basically an issue where it struggled to, I couldn't really open and close on its own, and which basically forces you to use the emergency eject hole that like all optical drives have just to get the drive open. And though that was really just a matter of I guess the belt being loose, because that actually is a common that actually is a common problem with like cassette players and CD players, or really anything that uses like rubber belts. Basically the rubber, as it gets old, it basically turns into it gets hard, or in some cases it like disintegrates. But I'm guessing that was really that's really what the problem was with that optical drive. But I never was to fix that problem, and in fact I think at one point I wanted to upgrade the RAM, but I never ended up doing that. And though that didn't actually really end up mattering, at least that the computer was still perfectly usable as long as I'm not trying to use the internet. At least as long as I don't try to use the internet, that computer was great. But anyway, I don't really have much else to say without rambling on too much farther, so I guess that concludes my story of the, I guess it's the IBM Netvista with all the games preloaded on it. And then that'll conclude this episode. And if you've enjoyed what you saw, remember to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you want to see my next videos, be sure to hit that bell for notifications. And this is me, Dusty, signing off. Peace out.